Looking back at my preliminary task, I have learnt a lot from the process, and it is shown in my final horror film opening sequence. When I started the preliminary task, I had planned a storyboard to fit the brief. The brief was filming and editing a character opening a door, crossing a room, and sitting down in a chair opposite another character, with whom he or she exchanges a couple of lines of dialogue. This task should demonstrate match on action, shot reverse shot, and the 180-degree rule. When I did my preliminary task, I did not do any research before starting, but I conducted a lot of research into the horror and thriller genre before planning my opening sequence. I did this to ensure my film fitted the category. For this reason, my preliminary task does not have an obvious genre because I didn't decide on one, and I didn't look into what technical codes were used within the style of film. In contrast, I did a lot of in-depth research before I even started to plan my film opening, because I wanted to ensure that I had used conventions and codes that were typically found in horror and thriller genres, to make the film as recognisable to the audience as possible. I looked into camera shots, angles and movements and why they are used in horror films. For example, low-angled shots are used to make the character or object look more dominant and powerful, and in contrast make the audience and the character look weak. I also did research into the openings of 3 different horror films, which were Saw, Paranormal Activity and Insidious. This helped me conduct my film as it helped me understand what narratives happen within the first 2 minutes, and also what sort of camera angles were used to convey the genre, and if they used quick edits or longer ones. For this research, I learnt that 2 minutes of a horror film consists of clips that introduce a character or location and doesn't include much narrative, but can include a narrative enigma, which can then entice the audience to carry on watching. I also found out that clips vary in length depending on what is shown on screen. For example, the clips pan and they're longer, which are the ones that show locations, but ones that are quick are normally close-up of a character's face to build suspense. I then used this information in my opening sequence to ensure that my film fitted the genre. My preliminary task was not planned effectively and was only storyboarded around a basic idea that fitted the brief. This meant that the task was only 34 seconds long and consisted of clips that were all the same length. I progressed a lot from creating my preliminary task to the final product because I realised how much planning went into the production of a film, and I also wanted to include the conventions and codes that I found out from doing my research. Because I found out horror films use a lot of clip lengths and shot types, my storyboard ended up being 12 pages long compared to the 3 pages for my preliminary task. When I first did my storyboard for the preliminary task, I didn't know how much detail I needed to go into, so therefore when I came to film it was hard to follow. To help me develop and avoid this problem when planning my opening sequence, I created a very detailed storyboard as well as a shot list and filming schedule, so I was organised and clear of my aims and intentions. I also had to consider things like costumes and plan out what my characters would wear for each scene, as I would be filming over several days, whereas I only filmed over 1 day for my preliminary task. All this planning and research I conducted really helped me in the editing process, as I knew the things I wanted to add to fit the conventions of a horror and thriller film. Because I had found out that horror films have a variety of shots and longer clips, I filmed them in different lengths so I didn't have to cut them down at the editing stage, so therefore made the process smoother. This then allowed me to take time to decide on the right music that would build the tense atmosphere and fit what was happening on the screen, and also played around with different visual effects to further improve the opening. This then contrasted with my preliminary task because I didn't use any music or visual effects when editing, as I didn't know the genre of my piece. This then made the sequence boring, so I made sure I developed this when creating my film opening. I improved certain shots that I'd included in my preliminary task that had looked effective but weren't as smooth as I had liked. For example, in my preliminary task, I used a panning shot to show Jack walking past, but I had filmed it without a tripod, so therefore it looked shaky and not smooth. After doing my research, I found out that panning shots were typically used as one of the main camera movements in a horror film, so I wanted to try and improve the quality of filming and use it in my real product. I did this by using a tripod to keep the camera still, and it also helped me turn it in one smooth motion instead of being jittery. When I first started filming my preliminary task, I had never used a Canon camera, so therefore the layout and display was new to me. This meant that it took me a while to get used to how to use the camera, and this led to some clips that were cut too short, filmed at the wrong time, or were out of focus. The preliminary task allowed me to use the camera and get used to it, and also get used to the tripod. This then meant that I was more educated when it came to filming the final product, as I'd already had practice before. By the end of the process, I was very confident in using the equipment, which showed how much I had developed from the beginning of the course to the final product. I feel that my end product was very successful in fulfilling the task of creating the titles and opening of a new film that lasted a maximum of 2 minutes. I believe this because I had researched in depth into my chosen genre of the horror thriller hybrid and used the conventions and codes that I'd researched into my planning. My movie opening also contained a film title and production titles that I had taught myself to create in Adobe After Effects, which I used and created a professional element to my opening. Overall, I'm very pleased with how my film turned out as an end product.